We have with us today Ingo Swann. Ingo's talk is remote viewing of UFOs and ETs. Acclaimed as our generation's greatest psychic, Ingo Swann was a central figure in the CIA-sponsored psychic spying programs using remote viewing. In one of his very rare public appearances, Ingo will discuss what remote viewing reveals about extraterrestrial contact with our species. Okay, everybody, we'd like to welcome Ingo Swann. Welcome, Ingo.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the applause. There's been many times when I didn't get as much. Can I adjust this?
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm getting old and my back will hurt. I guess so. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Actually, the title of my lecture didn't have a title because what I meant to do was answer questions from the audience. I get tired of writing lectures, and actually I stopped doing that as of this last June, and I'm not going to write anymore because it takes too much time. And I've always liked to know what people in the audience have in mind, because it helps expand my knowledge of people out there. And actually, if you people weren't out there and have an interest in things, then Pat Marcatillo couldn't set this up. So that was what I was going to do, and I probably will still do that. But I think that how many here were born after 1965? Yeah, so you don't know who I am. So what I think I'll do is tell you who I am in a partial sense. In New York in 1970, I had a very good friend named Zelda Suplee, who had worked in publishing and was the first-class editor and at that time director of the Erickson Educational Foundation. And she was a big Earth Mother type, but her main claim to fame was that she and her husband had owned 3 nudist camps during the 40s and 50s. And as a result, she knew everybody in the world because everybody came to her nudist camps. And she was wonderful, and I just adored her, and I hung out a lot of times in her apartment for, and anyhow, she was one of these types that everybody who's outside of society comes to talk to, you know. And so she had a wide circle of friends, and amongst those was a young man and wife who, this was just at the period when infrared photography became available to the public. And so they were running around with cameras loaded with infrared film, and they wanted to see if infrared film could catch psychic phenomena like ghosts and things like that. So anyhow, one day I was at Zelda's and these two came and they said, we've been trying to find people who can produce energies that might record on the film. And so Zelda said, why don't you try Ingo? So I went with these two into Zelda's bedroom, and the drapes could be closed, so it was perfectly dark. There was no light in there. And I sat in this chair, and these two had set up their camera and aiming it at me, and they said, all right, Ingo, do your thing. And I said, well, what is that thing I'm supposed to do? I didn't have a clue. So they said, well, create some energy in your hands. So I said, okay, I'll try that. So I stuck my hands out and imagined energy in them and things like that. And I said, well, what else can I do? And they said, well, make a ball of light above your head. So I did that in this totally dark room and things, and then we did a lot of other things. So then the film had to be developed, and that took about 4 days back then. And then they came back with, here I am sitting in this chair with the light balls in my hand, and you could see them. They're sort of half moonlight, and they lit up the underside of my face and things in this dark room. And you could push me over with a feather. I'm leaning on this. Well, why didn't you have that fixed up before you started? So then the really nice one was that, imagine the ball of light over your head, you know. Well, it wasn't a big ball of light, it was a little tiny ball of light about 3 feet over my head, where I said I was trying to do that and everything. And then a lot of the film didn't show anything, but there were 3 or 4 other ones that were really good. So this came like a bombshell in Manhattan at the edges of the parapsychology community, and even Stanley Krippner said, "This is wonderful." Have you ever heard of Stanley Krippner? Well, he says everything is wonderful, but I think he really meant it in this case. And so then that was in June. It was hot as hell in New York. And then it came in September. Now, Zelda was a Virgo, as I am, and for many years she'd been holding a Virgo birthday party for all of the Virgos that she knew, you know, because everybody hates Virgos, you know, they're so pissantish, I guess. And so she invited them all, and so a lot of them came. And then that was the party I met gosh, you see, I'm getting old. I met, who was it I met?
Stanley Krippner?
No, I already knew Stanley Krippner. Bob Monroe. I met Bob Monroe. And then I met the plant research guy. What was his name?
Cleve Baxter?
Cleve Baxter. I may not get through this lecture. Bob Monroe was, I mean, everybody was in awe of these tacky little photographs, you know. And everybody said, "Do you want to try it again?" I said, "I don't think so, you know." Anyhow, I got along with Bob Monroe really well, and we became lifelong friends until he died. And then there was Cleve Baxter, who, do you remember him? He had a big lie detector school in Manhattan, and he was a consultant to the CIA and the FBI lie detecting systems, and he trained their personnel to do this and everything. So he had a lot of lie detectors, you know. It was a lab that had about, I don't know, 8 or 9 rooms to it. So he had taken his lie detector things and hooked them up to plants to see if plants would show anything on the output of the lie detector. And the plants did. They showed an electric potential thing going up and down like this and everything. And then he said, "Well, is this a consciousness, or is this just electric potential in these plants and everything?" So he got the idea. He pulled out he got a match and burnt the leaf of one of them. And there was this big spike that occurred on the readout. So the plant had responded to this burning. And he was a kind man, and he didn't want to really burn his plants. And then he found out if he just thought he was going to burn this plant, that there was a big spike. And so he was having people come in and think about burning the plant leaf and watching the thing on the lie detector outputs, you know. So anyhow, at Zelda's party, he was a very shy guy, and he'd gone into the kitchen and gotten in this little space between the refrigerator and the wall, and there were several women who were trying to jump his bones back there and everything. And he was talking plant, and they were talking about how beautiful he was. Anyhow, I sort of muscled in. I said, "You know, I'd really like to see this plant stuff." And he says, "Well, come on up to my lab." And so a few days later, I went up